Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here for lowpost.com, and I'm back again with the next lesson in our Scratch Essentials tutorial series. And in this lesson, we're all about effects. We're going to start out talking about how we can apply effects to layers inside of our shots. We're then going to move on, talk about transfer modes when it comes to adding effects. We're going to add a fire effect to one of our shots, and I'm going to show you how we're going to do it with transfer modes, as well as getting in and grading that element that we brought in as a QuickTime file. And last but certainly not least, I want to wrap things up by talking about how you can work with matte keys directly inside of your Scratch timeline. Alright, so let's Command or Alt and Tab into Assimilate Scratch, and you'll see here that we have a timeline laid out. We're really only going to be focusing on the first shot, but of course we do have our film strip view open just in case we needed quick access to any other shot in our timeline. Now let's call up our versions window and let's add a new version. Now we're going to make sure that version is selected, and we're going to give it a little bit of a grade here. So let me just crush the blacks a little bit. We'll lift the mids up, we'll lift the highlights up, and I'm just going to give this a lot of saturation just because this is going to be like the Michael Bay look that you see, that oversaturated look. Now what we're going to do is we're going to apply the sun. Now I'm going to apply the sun as a third-party effect from Boris FX. We're going to use Boris FX as Sapphire to do this. Now you don't need to know anything about Sapphire or how it works. We're simply going to be running off of presets as we go. So let's come and create a new version. Keep in mind that with the layer or the version that we have selected, if we add a new version, it's going to create us a new version with all of the parameters and effects added that were on that previous layer or that previous version. So we're going to select it. Now we're going to apply this effect as a layer effect. Now we can come over to our layers and create a new layer to add the effect to, or we can let Scratch do it for us. So let's just let Scratch do it for us. What I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate down to our plugins. Now you'll see here is the Sapphire effects. I'm going to come to lighting. I'm going to select lens flare. Now you'll see that we have the ability to apply it as a layer or on the layer or on a node. Now for the purposes of this lesson, I'm going to apply it on a layer. We're going to dedicate an entire lesson specifically to nodes coming up shortly. So we're going to say apply on layer. We'll give Scratch a second to apply the effect. And once it does, you'll see there's the lens flare all set to go. Now I'm going to take the lens flare, and we're just going to take it and stick it above the mountains here. Put it right about there. And once it's there, I want to draw your attention over to the layers panel where you'll see that a new layer has been added, and it's been named what the actual effect is called, S_lens flare. This is a great way for you to easily keep track, if you have multiple layers, which layer actually is the flare effect. It's on this layer. Of course, we can enable and disable the flare. Very nice. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to come over and I'm going to add another version because I want to give this next version a different flare look. So let's do this. And again, I said I'm going to be rolling completely off presets. I'm simply going to give this layer one that looks like the sun. Here we go. Let's just come down a little bit. Perfect. There we go. Looks like the sun. A simple double click. It's now going to look like the sun. And what we're going to do is we're simply going to position this layer off frame so that it's all set to go looking like an actual sun. Now, before we move on, I want to talk about something that is a little bit important. I'm actually just going to switch versions back to this flare right here. Now, the reason I want to switch to this flare is because this flare has some extra elements to it that you can see on screen that are going to be important in just a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to apply another effect to this layer. Let's come back down to our plugins. Let's come to the blur category, and I'm just going to apply a soft blur. Again, I'm going to apply it to the layer. Now, once the soft blur is applied, we're just going to come into the soft focus, actually, not soft blur. Once it's applied to the layer, you're going to notice that what's happened is that we've lost some of the detail from the flare. This is where stacking order is exceptionally important. Now, if you're not familiar with stacking order, basically it's the way that Scratch reads the effects as they are stacked. Okay, basically right now what's happened is that on the layer the flare has been applied, and then on top of the flare the soft focus has been applied. But there might be a situation where I want to see the detail in the flare and I just want the soft focus to be on the background. So what we're going to need to do is to simply just get in and switch where those elements fall in the stacking order. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're working. Now let's sidetrack a little bit and let's talk about applying effects with transfer modes. Now, what type of effect would you ever need to apply with a transfer mode? Well, let's take a look. What we're going to do is I'm just going to delete these versions here. Okay, just get us back to our base layer. Very nice. And what I want to do is I want to add a fire element as a transfer mode. So what we're going to do is we're going to navigate down to the fill matte parameter, and I'm going to bring in an element that we're going to use as the front element. Now you'll see that we can drop in an element into this window here. So how do I go about doing that? Do I move the scratch window out of the way? You know what? I probably go back to the construct window. I can't really drag anything from here over to the timeline or the color effects window. Well, this is where right clicking always helps. Now you'll notice that if I right click, I can fetch a clip, which means to fetch it from our construct window, or what we can do is right click and simply say import clip. Now I'm going to get the clip from our desktop inside of our effect shots, and it is the Rampant 3K fire shot from Rampant Design Tools. I'm simply going to say open. You'll now see that I'm going to take it and I'm going to drag it and drop it down into the frontmost layer. Now you'll see that as I drag through, there's the fire element. Now what's important to keep in mind is that you'll notice that it has been added as a layer to this version. Okay? And what we have the ability to do with this layer is to come in to our canvas, and I'm going to come in and we're just going to adjust its size to be full frame right about there. Now of course we can't see anything except the fire. Okay, so what we want to do now is we simply want to head to the front tab. We're going to come down and we're going to apply this as a screen overlay mode, and you'll see now that there is the fire rolling through our shot. Now, of course, at any time we have the ability to, and we're just going to stop playing our footage here, to come in, we can rotate our canvas just like such. We'll just get it most of the way there. Perfect. I'm now going to place this over at the side of the screen here like such. I don't mind that's at a little bit of an angle, but you can now see that what we have is the fire coming out of the left side of the screen. Okay. Now, that's all really cool and everything, and what's also very cool is the fact that what we can do once we get the fire the way that we want is change its color. And of course, much like we had done before, all we're going to do is we're going to come in to, and let's just do it with a balance change here. And I'm just going to take the fire, maybe we'll make it blue, well, except for the fact that it's actually making the entire shot blue, which is not what I want to do. I actually only want the fire to be blue. So what am I going to do in this case? Well, this is where matte keys come into play. Okay, now you'll see by making this adjustment, I'm actually adding blue to the entire shot, or to the entire layer for that matter. And that's not what I want to do. We just want to isolate the fire. So how am I going to do this? Well, let's come back to the fill matte just for 1 second here. And what I'd actually like to do, because this fire is very bright and the background is very dark, that actually makes for almost a matte key. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and we're going to import a clip again. We're just going to import that same fire clip and I'm going to drop it into the matte section of our fill matte parameter. Okay, now you might be thinking, okay, Kev, well now you have the same element in here twice. Is that now going to help you get in and adjust the balance? Well, no, it's not, because I haven't actually told Scratch that I want to pull a matte from this fire element. So let's do that. I'm going to come back to fill matte. Now you'll notice that I have the ability to adjust the front or to adjust the matte. Now right now I haven't selected anything to be the matte. Right now red, green, blue, and alpha is all deselected. Now I'm just going to select the red channel for right now. Now you'll notice that as I come through, the red channel, the green channel, and the blue channel, the green channel and the red channel are pretty close. But the red, of course, because the fire is red, is going to be a lot brighter than that green channel. Now we can also combine channels if we want to, but I'm going to stick with just the red channel for now. Now you'll see that inside of the matte section, that's turned black and white. We're only accessing the information from the red channel, so basically we have white here, black here, which is going to make a perfect matte key. Now what we're going to do now is we're now going to come back and make that balance change. We're going to make that fire blue, and now only the fire is going to be blue. And if I want it to stand out a little bit more, maybe I'll use an add transfer mode just like that. I can come back now and hit play, and now that fire is only being adjusted to be made purple, or to be made even more red, or even a greenish color. Okay, So that's sort of an introductory step into mats. Now let's take that concept one step further, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here and let's make sure that we have all this more or less set to 0 here. I'm just going to punch in 0. We'll just punch in 0, and last but certainly not least, we'll punch in 0. Perfect. Okay, let's come back to our fill mat, and what we're going to do is we're going to bring in a new mat. Now, I think what we're going to do for the purposes of this is I'm just going to delete everything from here. Let's just delete that layer. Let's just add a new version. Perfect. Okay, so let's now come in and let's add an actual mat element to our timeline for us to work with. So again, right click, we're going to import a clip. The clip that I'm going to be bringing in is Rampant Design Tools Studio Mat Element. Let's come down, let's say open. You'll see we can of course take it and we're going to apply this as the actual mat layer. Okay, now once I apply it as the mat, you'll notice that as I drag through, we can see the mat in the mat window and actually what it's doing as far as animating in and animating out. Now you'll notice that by default, once I added that mat, it put our shot that we're currently working with in the front. So now if I was to come in, let's just come back to our balance. Let's just grab a balance effect or a balance adjustment and adjust it. You'll see that the mat is actually doing what we expect it to do. It's actually creating the cutout for us to grade with. But this really wasn't the type of effect that I wanted to create with a mat key. I wanted to create an actual mat key. So how do we go about doing that? Well, let's come back and let's right click and let's import a clip. What we're going to do is we're going to head back to our log footage. I'm just going to come to Monday and let's pick one of these shots here. We've already used all these shots. Let's pick one of the beach shots here. Sure, why not this one? I'm just going to say open, and what we're going to do is we're going to come back to fill mat, and I'm just going to stick it in the front. And as soon as I do, you'll now see that what's happened is that we now have that effect coming in just like such. That's adding the new shot in the mat and creating this very cool effect. Now, here's where things get really interesting. What if I wanted to make an adjustment to this mat? How do I go about doing it? Well, you'll notice that based on whether we're on the front or whether we're on the mat parameters, we can now get in and make adjustments. For example, if we're dealing with the front shot, which is the actual shot inside the mat, what I have the ability to do is everything from a translation change like such, okay, to a scaling change. And we even have the ability to come in and blur it right from here, okay? On the flip side of that, what we also have the ability to do on the mat is the same thing. I can blur the mat. Okay? I can adjust its translation in the X or Y. But more importantly, what we have the ability to do at any time is to lock the two of them together. So now if I make a blur adjustment, it's blurring the shot and the mat. Okay, so you can see that it almost looks like that this is a window sitting in front of our beautiful country shot that we can then bring into focus and bring out of focus whenever we need to. Now, the most important part of this concept and what's important to keep in the back of your head is that I'm using these mats for two specific purposes. One, when I first brought it in, I showed you how we can use it for grading. Second, you can see that we use the same technique to get in and to create actual visual effects using the mats inside of Scratch. So whether you're using it for color grading, whether you're using it for effects, the working with mats ability inside of Scratch is very powerful, very simple to use, and I love how we have the ability to get in and control the front element, the mat element, or both of them together at the same time. All right, now as always, if you have any questions, you have any comments, or ideas for upcoming lessons or courses, I want you to head on over and post them in our forums at lowpost.com/forums. And if you have any questions for me, you can always send them to kevinpmcauliffe@gmail.com.